All right, welcome back to the third part of our lectures on self-interest and the dilemmas of cooperation. Ethical egoists or psychological egoists, people who are only led by self-interest, have difficulty cooperating. And in this talk, I'm going to show you how you might go about creating cooperation and discuss a few of the wrinkles that come up. So creating cooperation, first of all, remember why cooperation is so important. There's the famous story in Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations about the pin factory. Smith visits a pin factory and he notices that specialization and the division of labor make the people in the factory much, much more productive than they are when they work alone. His figures are, and they're in the textbook, working alone, one pin maker could only make between 1 and 20 pins a day. But working in the pin factory with 10 workers dividing up the labor, right, each one sharpening the point, one putting on the head, one stretching out the barrel, whatever, 10 workers can make 48,000 pins a day. So by cooperating with others, one pin maker can make 4,800 pins per day, which is a huge gain from just making 1 in 10. And this specialization in the division of labor is a key element in production in our economy. It's also a key element in international trade, as we will look at later. It's really the foundation of our prosperity. People sometimes think that the free market is what makes us so wealthy, and that's partly true, because the free market is one way of organizing this cooperation. But it's not the only way. I mean, you can have command economies where the government tells everybody what to do and calculates how many pins should be made and how many dresses should be made, how many loaves of bread should be baked. But these do work, and they do produce cooperation, and they do allow specialization and division of labor, but perhaps not as efficiently. The trick about the free market is that it is very, very efficient at enabling specialization and division of labor. But the source of the prosperity is not perfect competition. It's not the competition, but the cooperation. Here's another little example, and I find these little almost game-like models useful in seeing what's going on. Here we've got a simple pin factory with two workers, Jack and Jill, and Jack is better at making pin heads. He can make 9 pin heads an hour, but only 1 pinpoint an hour. And Jill, it turns out, has the complementary skills. She is better at making points. She can make 9 points in an hour, but only 1 head. Now, if Jack works alone, then he is going to, in a 10-hour day, he is going to have to spend 1 hour making heads, make 9 of them, and 9 hours making points. And then he puts them together and he gets 9 pins. So by working alone, he'll only make 9 pins. Similarly, Jill, she'll have to work 9 hours to produce 9 pin heads and 1 hour to produce 9 pin points. And then at the end of the day, she'll have 9 pins. Okay, so the solitary production in a 10-hour day for the two of them added up is 18. Okay, but the trick is by cooperating, as we see in the next line, if Jack specializes in producing only pinheads, which is what he's good at, and Jill specializes in only producing pinpoints, which is what she's good at, and they each work for 10 hours, then Jack is going to come up with 90 pinheads, and Jill is going to come up with 90 pinpoints, and when they put them together, and we've left out the stage of them putting together, but they will have, at the end of the day, they will have 90. So by cooperating, by specializing, dividing the labor, and cooperating together, they can immensely increase their productivity. If they were ethical egoists, though, they would have trouble with cooperating because they'd steal each other's pins and points and break their agreements and do whatever would make them each better off themselves, and that is what we have to prevent. One way of doing this is with what's called a contractarian ethic. It's the view that ethics is an enforced contract amongst ethical egoists, which is designed to prevent these dilemmas of cooperation, like the prisoner's dilemma theory. It's not a social contract theory of distributive justice, which we'll look at later with John Rawls. This is Hobbesian contractarianism. It's a view that the people's obligation is to obey the rules of the game. And that's their only obligation, and those rules of the game are designed to permit cooperation. How would this work? Well, let's look at what you can do in a prisoner's dilemma. Here's Mike and Nancy, and they're in the same dilemma as before. They end up cheating here, but they'd really be better off if they cooperated. Well, you can constrain people's ethical egoism by imposing sort of government sanctions on them. Right here we have a tax on cheating, or a fine for cheating. If you apply a 6-unit fine, if the government applies if there is a government, which Hobbes called Leviathan, if there is a government and this government can impose penalties on people for breaking their contracts and not doing what they, for cheating, then you can actually move people into the cooperate center cell over here. So look, you take 6 units off of each person's payoff. These payoffs here are the same as they were in the elder cell, but whenever people cheat, they lose 6. So if Mike cheats, what was 5 loses 6, becomes -1. If he over here, if Nancy cheats when Mike cooperates, 15 minus 6 becomes 9. The penalty is chosen to produce the answer that I want, which is that when you reason through the game, if Nancy cheats, what's Mike going to do? Well, he's going to cooperate because 2 is more than -1. If Nancy cooperates, what's Mike going to do? Well, it turns out he's going to cooperate because, he's going to, I'm over here, he's going to cooperate because 10 is now greater than the payoff he would get for cheating. It was 15, but now it's only 9. Okay, so Mike has a dominant strategy, which is to cooperate, Mike's dominant strategy. Let's look at what Nancy will do. Well, if Mike cheats, what will Nancy do? Well, if she cheats, she gets -1. If she cooperates, she gets 2, so Nancy's going to cooperate. If Mike cooperates, what's Nancy going to do? Well, if she cheats, the payoff is diminished, and she's going to get 9, but if she cooperates, she's going to get 10. So Nancy's got the cooperate dominant strategy, and the players are going to end up over here, which is a much better place to be than here. Okay, so actually by government intervention or whatever to enforce cooperating and prevent cheating, cooperating could be just force them to respect each other's private property and force them to keep up the their promises to one another, then they can get into the better situation. Now, there's various ways you can constrain ethical egoists. I've been talking about the legal model where you impose fines. You can coerce cheaters, impose fines or prison time or whatever. The trouble with this is the transaction costs or whatever. It's very, very expensive if cheating is widespread. And if you've got a world where full of ethical egoists who are always obliged to cheat if they can, and psychological egoists will cheat if they can, then you're going to spend a lot of money on a police force and a legal system and courts and lawyers and all that to make sure that people don't cheat. Internal enforcement would be better if people shared expectations about the rules of the game and were able to in fact, felt ashamed when they cheated, felt guilty if they cheated, or shamed if they became the sort of person who cheats all the time. Then, if people could punish themselves and develop certain virtues like being fair and cooperative, etc., then the system, the contractarian system, would become much less expensive to run. Though there's problems because people will start to cheat, maybe if psychological egoism is true, and there's going to be different expectations and so on. But the thing is, internal enforcement, if you can achieve it, is going to be less expensive than external legal enforcement. Okay, here is just another one of these little questions just to help you settle some of the information that we've discussed, some of the concepts that we've discussed. Ethical egoism cannot say why one person is ethically more important than another. What sort of problem is this for ethical egoism? We looked at various weaknesses of ethical egoism. Which one is it here? So pause the video for a second, look through the list, and see what you think would be the best answer. Okay, welcome back. Is this the paradox of egoism? Remember, the paradox of egoism is some goods like friendship were not accessible to people who cheated all the time for their own self-interest. No, this isn't what this is saying. Is it a matter of crossing the is-ought gap? Is it going from the fact that people are psychological egoists to the fact that they should be or ought to be? No, that's not true. Is it a virtue ethics theory? Is it saying that ethical egoists are not virtuous? Well, it's true they're not. That's not what this is saying, right? That's not what this question is saying. Is it a moral standing problem? Well, yes, probably. Ethical egoism is not able to say why one person's interests, i.e. the self, are more important than everybody else's. So it is a moral standing issue. Is it also, don't forget when you're facing multiple choice questions, you're always looking for the best answer. Is it a cooperation problem? Not directly. No, it's not a prisoner's dilemma or something, so it's not that. So the best answer is that it is a moral standing issue. The ethical egoists are not able to say why their interests are the only ones that should be considered. All right, I'll see you in a few minutes.